Hey everyone, Art Burns here. I hope you all having a great day today. So yesterday, while I was in one of my social media time blocks and scrolling through social media in a very intentional way, this is something I still do every day. I set up time for myself to do social media, right? And it's very specific that, during that time, that's what I'm doing. I'm scrolling through social media. I'm checking, what notifications I have. I'm checking, for messages that I have. I'm just checking in on what different friends and different groups. I'm in a couple of really amazing plant groups. I'm in a couple of great mindfulness groups. So I'm checking in, right? But I only spend that time. Right there's a couple times during the day where I take 10 minutes or so, and that's what I'm doing during that time. But then outside of that time, I'm not on social media. And so if you'd like some tips on how that works, I'd be more than happy to share some with you, because this is something that I used to get very wrapped up in, just endlessly scrolling and getting myself, very anxious and even depressed, and seeing, just an emotional roller coaster of different things that I'm seeing on social media. Some of it's very upsetting. Some of it's very, there's a lot of emotions there, a lot of, resentment that I see in people. There's anger I see, and it affects us as we're just sort of scrolling through this. And if you're not intentional about it, you can absolutely get swept up by it. A long time goes by, whether it's a half hour, even an hour goes by, and now you're not in an emotional place where it's, you're in a non-intentional emotional place, and this is usually not going to serve you, especially now, when your kids run into the room and need something from you. You're in this place now where you're not present and you're not available to your life. So if you'd like some information, some very simple hacks that I've developed to get myself to do this and to build this habit, I'd be more than happy to share those with you. So hit me up with that if you have a question about that. But yesterday, while I was scrolling through social media, I saw this, I guess it's a meme. It's just one of those things where it's all text on like a background, and I don't even remember who it was that posted it, but the text said, "Live out your imagination instead of your memories." Right now, I that gave me pause. Kind of stopped the scroll. It slowed my scroll, and I sat with that for a few moments, and I really, first of all, that's fantastic advice. It's really good advice, right? Like if we dwell in our memories, right, as opposed to, because what the post is saying to me is live out the potential as opposed to the fear, right? That's what that really is saying to me, right? That when we're living in our memory, that tends to be that we're living in the things that kind of, that we feel, maybe kind of confining us and limiting us, right? Whereas if we live our imagination is endless, right? That just like the compassion in our hearts, it's endless. There's literally no limit to it. Right, but then I started thinking a little bit more about that, and I pretty much used the rest of my intentional Facebook time on this one post, which is beautiful, right? Like that's kind of the idea. But I started thinking about the fact that, yes, that's a great concept, right? To live out your imagination instead of your memories, live out your potential instead of your limitations. That's a wonderful, wonderful idea. But because of the way our minds and our brains and our bodies work, it's very much easier said than done. And let me explain to you how I mean by that, what I mean by that. So when everything that we feel is possible, right? As we're walking through our days, everything that we feel we can do, everything that we feel that we are going to feel, everything that in fact, everything we think on a moment-to-moment basis, right, is based on our memories, right? Everything. You basically, as you're living and you're creating memories, right? You're creating the blueprint for the world, for your experience. You're creating the schematic for how your life works and what's potential to happen and what's, going to happen and what could never happen, right? And so that's why, yes, the concept of this post is profoundly correct and profoundly important, right? But the thing is that it's not just the kind of thing where you can say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that from now on. And I mean, I hope you're successful if that's what you do. I mean, I honestly do truly hope that. But chances are it's not going to work that way, right? Because we've built our whole lives living in a way that in which we are defined by our memory experiences, right? It's just the way it works. And in a lot of cases, these memory experiences are generational, right? They're things that your grandparents went through that are now affecting how you see the world, right? And it's passed down generation to generation to generation, which is something as parents is really important for us to be aware of, right? Because, and I've talked about this before, this intergenerational trauma that happens, right? And so, let's say your parents, your great grandparents, or my grandparents, I always get tongue tied with that stuff. My grandparents lived in the age of the Depression, right? So they grew up with very, 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 very much scarcity in their lives, right? Like the food was a commodity that they were, it was precious. It was like gold, right? So my mother grew up in the environment created by them, right? And so that means that I am going to tend to have this sense of scarcity, right? And of course, this is just one example. I mean, there's millions of potentials of how different biases that can come through and different traumas that can come through from generation to generation. And of course, it goes back further than just your grandparents. It goes back 7 or 10 generations from where you are, right? But the idea is that, I am likely to act in a certain way because of the way that my grandparents, then my parents, and then I grew up, right? Because we passed that stuff down, right? Now, of course, some of these generational cycles are broken, thankfully, right? But we can intentionally really be aware of the generational cycles and live in the service of breaking them, right? Now, I've done another video on that, so I don't want to spend too much time on how that all works, but just just assuming that just understanding and acknowledging that it's there, right? And that is only part of the memories that we create. Like, so that's like, say, if you want to put a percentage on it, let's say it's half, let's say, or let's say a third of our memories that we form in our life are based on generational memories that are passed down from grandparent, great grandparent to parent to us, right? Then the rest of our memories are based on our personal experiences, right? But even those are deeply, deeply impacted by the people around us, right? Like when we're kids, generally speaking, psychologists and neuroscientists will tell you that, in the first 7 years of our life is where we lay the groundwork for this worldview that we have, right? Until we intentionally change it, right? Which is the good news. It's nothing set in stone. You're not prohibited from changing your worldview and reprogramming yourself. But those first 7 years of our lives, while we're watching, what our parents do, we're watching what our friends do, we're watching what our teachers and our coaches and the people on TV and the different animals in our lives, we're watching all of these things happen, right? The interactions that we see going on, the way that people, seem to approve of things versus disapprove of other things. And we're kind of soaking all that in the first 7 years of our life. And that is creating the other, say, 66% of the whole of our memory and the memory that's going to push us through for the rest of our lives, right? So that plus the generational memory that we have equals what we consider to be possible. Right? It's what we consider to be, the limitations of what we, of what we're capable of and what we could possibly do in our lives, right? And so that's what makes us, parent in a certain way. That's what makes us, react, respond and react in a certain way to everything from a traffic jam to an interaction in a grocery store or a waiter, a server in a restaurant or business dealings or with friends and family. This is what creates that, sort of pattern of behavior, right? So what that meme was saying, right, is that, try not to live in all of that, right? Because that's what's limiting us, right? That's what's defining for us what we feel is our potential, right? So instead, look forward to realizing that that is not, it's not a sentence, and it's not something that is prohibitive, right? Even though it's there, even though it exists, and this is what we're likely to default into, it doesn't mean that we're not capable of changing. And it doesn't mean that we're not capable of living out our actual potential and our actual imagination, right? But again, here's the thing. Those memories are very, very strong, right? Again, they go generations back before we were even born, right? So, and some of them, and then the rest are from the very early days of our lives, right? Give you a very simple example, right? If let's say, you were almost drowned in a pool. I hope that didn't happen to you, but let's say a child is almost drowned in a pool when they're 5 years old, right? For the rest of their lives, they are going to feel that they cannot swim. They're going to have that fear, that tension that's going to arise in them every time they walk into a pool. They might even, if they smell chlorine, they might get that sense, right? Now, it's not real, right? What happened to you when you're 5 years old is not what's happening to you now. In fact, even if you threw an adult into a pool, I'm sure that they could most likely manage to float long enough to be saved, right? Like it's not as automatic as it might seem, right? Because it's a phobia, right? That phobia is based on the memory, which then, defines the future, right? Like, no, I can't swim. You could learn to swim. You absolutely could learn to swim. In a safe and constructive environment, you absolutely could learn how to swim, right? So that's just another example of what I'm talking about, right? So how then, because these are very powerful memories that we're talking about, right? And they're very, and again, it's not just a question of reading this meme on Facebook and saying, oh, okay, now I got it. Okay, cool. I'll just live in my imagination from now on. That might work for even a couple of days if you remind yourself to do it. But eventually your habit, your automatic mind and process is going to, kind of bring you back into the way that you've always done things. Because again, that is what you know. Right? Our future is determined by what we know, right? Or it's defined by what we know, right? And unfortunately, we allow ourselves to be determined and controlled by that, right? And that's where, mindfulness practices allow us to be present and to really see what's going on, right? And when we can see what's going on, when we can see that, oh yeah, I am having this reaction to when I see food about to be thrown away, right? Like that triggers in me this tightness of my chest because the way my grandmother and my mother were always talking about that. I can't let somebody throw food out. I'll eat it, right? And so then I gain weight and I become unhealthy, right? But I can never let somebody throw, so knowing that is something that is potential in me. And that's why I used to be 100 pounds heavier than I am right now, right? That's one of the reasons, right? And so, and not to mention the stress, right? Which was also passed down, right? Like as your, my grandparents lived in this depression era, very scarcity and very, difficult life. There was a lot of stress, and that stress got passed to my mother, which got passed to me, right? So I know that, right? And in knowing that and holding that in a non-judging awareness, I am able then to navigate around it, and I'm able to overcome that. And I'm able to say, okay, the food, it doesn't, whether I eat it or it goes in the garbage, it's still wasted. So all we can do is try next time to not make so much food that we'll waste it, right? As opposed to, oh, no, I'll eat it so it doesn't go to waste, right? And that's a true story, by the way. So here's the thing, right? So it's important to be present and to see these things as they're happening. But it's also important to get to know why these things happen. And it's important to understand these motivations that we have, these emotional motivations that we have, right? And this is all part of emotional intelligence, right? Understanding that source of our motivation, right? And so there's a really great practice that you can do for as little as literally 2 or 3 minutes a day. And don't tell me you don't have 2 or 3 minutes a day. Okay? It's like, no, you do, right? In fact, why don't you let me help you with time blocking your social media, and I guarantee I free up an hour a day. And I say that without any judgment because I know how it is. But seriously, 3 minutes, 5 minutes a day, okay? If you can. I mean, the thing is that once you start doing this, you wind up spending way more time, and you realize that, wow, this is a great investment of my time, so I do it anyway. So anyway, the practice that I'm talking about is journaling. Now, journaling takes on many different forms and many different ideas, and most people who I talk to, when I say, hey, have you ever tried journaling? And I talk to my clients all the time about it. Have you ever tried journaling? And almost every time, people are like, yeah, I've done some journaling, sure. And I don't really do it regularly, but I've done it. I'll try it. Is there a reason to do it? And I say, yes, there is a reason to do it. And this is the reason, right? That as we spend time each day, right, just writing out our feelings and our emotions and our sort of this whole jumble of thoughts and emotions and sensations in our body, when we allow all of that stuff to come through our hands onto a piece of paper, specifically a piece of paper that no one else in the world is ever going to read. I mean, seriously, some people actually burn their journals when they finish the book, right? They literally burn it so that there's no, it literally goes into the air. There's nothing left, right? And that's an interesting cathartic kind of way to do it. And I don't personally do that, but I felt I might start doing that. It's a really appealing idea to me. But anyway, the idea is that when we allow ourselves to just dump all of that from our brain onto the paper, some really important things happen, right? Number one, it gives our body the chance to really get that stuff out of it, right? Which is important because, there's, for most of us, now if you're in therapy, it's a little different, right? Because if you're in therapy, then once a week you go to a place where that doctor is literally bound by law to not share anything that you say in that session. So yes, you are able to really let it flow and really let your everything out, right? But most of us, many of us are not in therapy, and so this is that kind of thing, right? That we're taking this sanctity of this privacy and just letting it all out, just dumping it, right? Because again, I was saying, if you're not in some sort of therapy situation, then there's only so much that you're ever going to share with anybody in your life, right? Whether it's your spouse, your children, your sisters or brothers, or your parents, or your friends. Most of us have a boundary. Most of us have a point that we're not going to go past, right? There's something that's private, right? That we won't share that, right? And that's the deep stuff, right? That's that shadow stuff that we need to get out, right? And getting it out, not only, there's actually physical reasons to do this, right? There's been studies done that I could share with you some notes from the studies, but studies have been done with there's one study done with college students. Like a couple of hundred college students were asked to journal for just 2 minutes a day on 2 consecutive days. And in those 2 days, before the practice, before the 2 days, they did a blood test, right, and an overall psychological evaluation, right, and then they did the same blood test and psychological evaluation afterward. The blood test alone, right, blood sugar was regulated better. White blood cell counts were like immune system stuff were much higher. There was just better biological regulation in just 2 days. 2 minutes, 2 days. So 4 minutes total. That's it, right? And then of course in the psychological evaluation, the students all reported feeling better, more emotionally light, and more emotionally at ease, right? After just 2 minutes a day for 2 consecutive days. Okay, so imagine what doing 5 minutes a day for a few months is going to do for you. Right now, I've been journaling now for almost every single day for about 3 years now. And it is just an absolute, like, I'll never give it up. I don't do it every single night. There's nights where I'm just too tired. I can't do it. I like to do it at the end of the day. You can do it at the beginning of the day. That's up to you. But the key to this also is, and anyway, I'm sorry. I just live by it now. I will never give it up. It's been so beneficial to me because one of the things that we learn through journaling, right? And journaling in a specific way that I'm going to get to in just a second. But when we journal, what we're doing is we're not only getting all of that stuff out, right? But in getting it out, we start to understand, right? We start to see patterns. We start to get a sense of, wow, yeah, look at this. Every time this kind of thing happens, I do this kind of thing, this other thing, right? That's the pattern, right? That's the programming. That's that thing of all those memories dictating how you're going to live in the future. And only when you can understand these memories in this way can you hope to avoid living out the memories and living out your imagination. All right, so now again, there's many different forms of journaling, and I have a specific one that I'd be happy to share with you. It includes prompts, okay? But essentially what we're doing is journaling for self-discovery. Okay, so you're journaling about how you're feeling, about what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what makes you go, right? And I can give you a list of prompts to start with because a lot of times the scariest thing about journaling is writing that first word, right? Like just staring at that blank piece of paper and like, what the heck do I write? So I give you prompts. So you write like, I am feeling ... I'm feeling right now ... and just start writing on that, right? What makes me happy ... what makes me unhappy ... I feel I did really well when this happened ... that kind of stuff. I have a bunch of prompts that I can give you. After a little while though, you don't need the prompts. They're just a good starting point, a jumping off point. But get in touch with me and let me share this with you, okay? Because it's really, really powerful. And it's powerful to not only, regulate ourselves and feel better and heal from some of this trauma that we've lived through in our lives, but it's also an amazing way to understand the memories that we have in us and how they impact our future. And only in that understanding can we then live out our imagination rather than our memories. All right, everybody, I hope you found this interesting. I hope you're interested in trying to journal. I will send you the document with all the prompts and the instructions. There's specific instructions about how much time and this kind of stuff, so hit me up and I can send you a PDF lickety split. All right, everybody, wishing you well. Hope you're all having a great day. I hope that your future is bright, and I will see you tomorrow.